Imagine sitting in the control room of a textile mill in the mid-1960s, watching threadbare fabric come off the loom, and realizing you're not just watching the end of an industry, but holding the first seed of a financial empire that, decades later, will exceed $800 billion in value. That's what Warren Buffett, 34, and Charlie Munger, 41, did. They didn't chase hype, they built systems. If you're ready to step into their world of patient discipline, fortress-like float, and quiet compounding power, then you're in the right place. Hit subscribe and you'll never miss a lesson from the greatest long-term investors of our time. In 1965, at the age of 34, Warren Buffett took control of Berkshire Hathaway, a struggling textile company with outdated looms, razor-thin margins, and shrinking prospects. Almost a decade later, at age 41, Charlie Munger would join him as a foundational partner in reshaping the company's destiny. The story of how two men, in their mid-30s and early 40s, transformed a moribund textile manufacturing firm into an investment giant worth well over $800 billion is less about flashy deals or seismic acquisitions and more about unwavering patience, capital discipline, and the relentless forging of a durable culture. In this story, there were no quick hits, no chase for headlines. Instead, there was the quiet compounding of quality, the steady harnessing of insurance float, and the disciplined ownership of exceptional businesses run by extraordinary people. It began with Buffett's recognition that Berkshire's core textile business had limited future. At 34, he sensed that the real asset was not the looms but the cash flow, or rather, the potential for cash flow if the business could be kept alive long enough to fund something better. Working in an industrial complex with humming machinery and dusty offices, he transformed the narrative. "We're not saving a textile mill," he might have said. "We're using it as a cash machine." Charlie Munger, then 41, offered the intellectual scaffolding, mental models, inversion thinking, and a robust emphasis on quality over quantity. Together, they set their guardrails. Their rules would become legendary. Stay within your circle of competence, insist on a margin of safety, hold cash when opportunities are scarce, be patient, for it is only when the tide goes out that you see who's been swimming naked, and treat shareholders as partners, never as marks. Within 2 years of Buffett's takeover, they began acquiring insurance businesses, most notably National Indemnity, so that they could tap into insurance float, money held from premiums before claims were paid. Buffett, at 36, grasped something powerful. Float is like a low-cost, revolving line of capital. If you underwrite price conservatively and reserve cautiously, that float isn't just cheap, it's effectively free capital you can invest in the meantime. Munger, 43, nodded approvingly. This wasn't speculation, it was leverage with no interest, freed by underwriting expertise. The insurance float became the engine that would drive Berkshire's compounding machine. In 1972, Buffett, now 42, and Munger, now 48, made a pivotal shift. They bought Candies. It was a small West Coast brand with devoted customers, recurring holiday purchases, and significant pricing power. They paid up, not bargain basement prices, but for a brand whose customers would forgive price increases. As the candy flowed, so did cash, practically instantaneous profits. C's taught them their most important lesson: quality compounds. A mediocre company at a discount value eventually disappoints. A wonderful company at a fair price, ideally one with pricing power, loyalty, and durable economics, compounds over decades. That lesson would echo in every future investment. The 1973-74 bear market tested Berkshire's foundation. Buffett, 43, and Munger, 49, watched as the markets crashed yet again. Many panicked. They did not. With float continuing to roll in and equity prices depressed, opportunity greeted them. They added selectively, not recklessly. The key idea was that volatility is not risk when you own durable assets and have a buffer. Risk is being forced to sell at the wrong time. Berkshire couldn't be forced to sell. Those years weren't won on headlines, they were won in quiet conviction. In 1983, Berkshire acquired Nebraska Furniture Mart and its iconic founder Rose, Mrs. B. Blumkin, then around 89 years old. Mrs. B ran the business with scrappiness, drive, and a legendary ability to cut costs and negotiate fiercely. Buffett, then 53, and Munger, 59, didn't rebrand it, didn't insist on a corporate bake-off or synergy forecast. They left her alone. Buy great managers, get out of their way. That principle became baked into Berkshire's DNA. The company wasn't just acquiring businesses, it was acquiring them with autonomy, culture, and leadership intact. In 1986, a 34-year-old and relatively unknown actuarial analyst named Ajit Jain joined Berkshire. Buffett, 56, and Munger, 62, recognized a rare blend: actuarial rigor, analytical discipline, and underwriting courage. They gave him control over complex reinsurance risks, and over time, Jain turned the insurance fortress into something near impenetrable. Float balloons, the margin of safety widens. It isn't showmanship that builds moats, it's people with aligned incentives, integrity, and domain mastery. The next big move came in 1988, when Buffett, 58, and Munger, 64, poured a substantial stake into Coca-Cola. Buying a piece of a brand so ubiquitous, so ingrained in global culture, was not thrilling, but it was brilliantly strategic. The moat wasn't beta, it was habit, distribution, and brand love. Coca-Cola delivered dividends, dividends bought back shares, buybacks added compounding fuel. Another lesson reaffirmed: moats plus patient ownership equals quiet growth that beats almost anything else. In 1999, Berkshire stepped into the utilities and energy business through its investment in Mid-American Energy, later rebranded Berkshire Hathaway Energy. At that point, Greg Abel, then about 37, was rising in the energy ranks. Buffett, at 69, and Munger, at 75, were attracted by predictability. Utilities aren't glamorous, they're essential. Their regulated returns, long-duration assets, and monopoly-like local positions fit the Berkshire mold: stable cash, controlled risk. Abel would eventually become one of the key leaders driving this pillar of Berkshire's earnings. The global financial crisis of 2008-2009 was a decade-end shock. When most were terrified, Buffett, now 79, and Munger, 85, leaned into it. They bought BNSF Railway outright, a high-capital, strategic U.S. transportation backbone. The rails were, and are, critical. They move coal, grain, oil, manufactured goods. The business is durable, not wow-factor glamorous. Railroad economics are fortress-like. And the acquisition was framed not as a deal, but as an all-in wager on America's economic future. That kind of conviction, grounded in compounding logic, reinforced a quiet system at the heart of Berkshire's DNA. By the mid-2010s, the world had changed. Tech companies dominated headlines and the public consciousness. Buffett, now in his mid-80s, around 86 to 88, and Munger, in his early to mid-90s, grappled with the new mythology of disruption. They voiced skepticism. Then they saw Apple, a brand ecosystem, repeat buyers, recurring services revenue, enormous global reach, and user lock-in. A combination of quality, moat, and modernity. They moved in, again reinforcing that old rules work on new lines. By anchored value plus durable consumer economics, wait. Apple became one of Berkshire's largest positions. Throughout it all, Buffett and Munger institutionalized continuity. In 2021, Greg Abel, then about 59, was named CEO in waiting. Ajit Jain, about 69 by then, had already proven himself as the insurance arm's future anchor. They didn't hand over a company of cracks and whispers, they handed over a disciplined culture, a capital allocation engine, and an orchestra of leaders doing the same tune. By 2025, Berkshire is well north of $800 billion in market value, a testament not to fireworks, but to polite stubbornness and relentless patience. What stands out in this narrative is how every step reinforced a coherent system. Buffett and Munger started with defining their circle of competence, knowing what they didn't know and staying within it. At 36 and 43, they installed a super funding source in insurance float. At 42 and 48, they cemented the quality mindset with C's Candies. Through market crashes, they demonstrated the calmness that volatility rewards. By trusting misses, and hiring wrestlers of risk like Ajit Jain, they proved people matter more than spreadsheets, if properly incentivized. By owning rails, utilities, and then embracing a modern consumer tech powerhouse, they showed that the same timeless principles can be applied in wildly different eras. And by building governance and succession plans around Greg Abel and Ajit Jain, they made the future smoother, not shakier. There were no chase scenes in this story. The drama wasn't in high-octane acquisitions or flashy puppet shows. It was in the quiet erosion of complacency and the gentle sharpening of discipline. They didn't need to be celebrated. The returns speak for themselves, not because of timing or luck, but because of consistency, integrity, and time. When you zoom out, you don't see 1,000 bets, you see a handful of irreversible moves taken at the right moment by people who refuse to be rushed. At the core of the story lie the personalities, or, more accurately, the constellations. Buffett, born in 1930, the student-turned-oracle of value, obsessed with reading, knew how to sit tight and only swing at fat pitches. Munger, born in 1924, provided the latticework, systems thinking, mental models, avoiding conventional traps, and a passion for rational rigor. In the background was Mrs. B, born in 1893, who embodied scrappy execution. Ajit Jain, born in 1952, embodied actuarial sobriety and risk discipline. Greg Abel, born in 1962, brought operational muscle to capital allocation. Their ages matter because they represent generational handoffs, not rapid hiring sprees. Authority was earned, not craved. So if you want to know how a $800 billion plus empire was built without chasing hype, here's your summary. Install a cheap and scalable funding engine, float by wonderful businesses with moats, hire and trust extraordinary operators, hold cash, and wait out the noise, own essential, predictable assets, and institutionalize the principles so they can outlast the founders. That's what Buffett and Munger did, from age 34 and 41 onward, year after year, decade after decade. No shortcuts, no slogans, just compounding discipline.